Okay, well, welcome everybody. Today we have Tess or Teresa at the Hillsborough Library. We're going to talk about becoming a public librarian. But before we get started, I just want to go over a few things. So don't forget to check in. This is really great for your counselors so they know that you're in this meeting and you're not, messing around, in the your school library. Over on the left, we have the great questions document. I know you guys get a lot of information during these things, so these are a great reference for you guys if you have any career related questions you want to ask the presenter. And then we have our evaluation form. And so this is the way we track your guys' attendance. So don't forget to fill that out. Try to be fully present. There's going to be a lot of great information, and it's always helpful for you guys in the future, whether you guys want to enter this profession or any other ones you find. And then don't forget to submit your evaluation. This is a requirement for graduation in Oregon, so just be sure to fill that out. Okay, I will go ahead and stop sharing. Tess, feel free to get started.
All right. So we're here to talk about what it means to be a public librarian. I work with the public and I help solve problems. I work at the Hillsborough Public Library. My pronouns are she, her. I go by Tess, but my given name is Teresa, and either one is really fine. I have kind of a cool role at the library. I am a librarian, but I run the makerspace, and a makerspace is a place for exploration and problem solving. It's a creative space and it's a community space. It's pretty special. Not all libraries have one, but Hillsborough has two. We have one at the Hillsborough Brookwood Library and one at the Hillsborough Chute Park Library. I get to work with 3D printers and sewing machines, and we even have a laser cutter at Brookwood. So it's pretty cool, and I get to see people having fun and making things and figuring things out on their own, and it's like the best job in the library. There are other kinds of librarians. There's academic librarians, specialty medical librarians, law librarians, health librarians. And then you're probably familiar with school librarians. So a public librarian just means you work in the general public. So you help everybody who has access to the library, which is everybody. I like to talk about librarian stereotypes because I have these as well. A big one is like, oh, that's so cool, you're a librarian, you get to read all day at work, which never happens. Also that we have to be quiet in the library. And I like to tell people that this is not a quiet library, especially in the maker space. We've got like 3D printers going, the laser cutter is really loud, and sewing machines. We have story times and kids are jumping around having fun. So it's not, it's different than your grandmother's library. It's definitely a more active community center, which is wonderful. And I love that. Sometimes we do get shushed by our patrons. So, and patrons is just library speak for kind of customers or the people that are in the space. So you'll hear me use that word a lot. Yeah, so I've gotten shushed by people who are trying to study, and we do have study rooms so that people can have those quiet spaces, which I know are really important too. But generally the library is a pretty loud place. And then another misconception is that we shelve books all day. There are people in the library that shelve books. A lot of them are volunteers on some of our pages, but librarians typically aren't the ones doing the shelving. And then another stereotype is that we wear cardigans, and that actually is true. There are lots of hot spots and cold spots in the library, so layering is just really smart. So that is one that I can attest to. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what my day looks like. This is an image of the inside of a 3D printer head. And I'm very familiar with this because I often have to take these apart to fix clogs. And it's an unexpected part of my day as a librarian. But other things that I do on a daily basis are I help patrons with their account information. So getting a library card or fixing blocks or notes in their account, updating their address. I get to help with technology questions a lot. So we do digital books. So if you've got an e-reader or a mobile device, then you can listen to or read your books on your device. And a lot of people need help getting that process started, just like downloading the app and linking their library card to that. We've got Wi-Fi and we have public computers that patrons can use. So sometimes there's not a lot of digital literacy for our patrons. So sometimes it's even just like showing someone how to use a mouse or how to click on an icon on the computer. Like sometimes it's very basic help. It's so important that there's a service like that that exists because people can't apply for housing or for jobs without having some digital literacy. So it's great that public libraries exist for those people. And then reference questions. So this is probably what you would assume is like people come in, they're looking for a book, I help them find it. Oftentimes a guy last week came in and was like, I'm looking for this pizza place and Google Maps won't help me. And so I helped him find it. He was just misspelling it. So we figured that out. You never really know what question you're going to get. So I find it really exciting to be in the library. It is, I have improved my communication skills with being a librarian. Oftentimes people will ask for something. The first thing they ask for isn't really what they want. It's interesting. It's just part of human behavior. So there's a lot of digging and asking follow-up questions, and we call that the reference interview. It seems like it would be easy, but it's interesting how sometimes difficult it is to get to the real question so that I can help answer it. I believe that all of the different questions we get as librarians is what makes us excellent Jeopardy contestants. And I read that there have been 150 Jeopardy contestants since 2005. And that's like a famous game show, if you're not sure. And then things that other duties that I have are as a librarian, I build programs. So a program is like a story time or an event. In the makerspace, we do an annual event called the Maker Fair. And this year will be our 5th annual Maker Fair. The last 2 have been online, and I don't know what will happen this year, but it's usually at the end of summer. So we'll see if we can do any in-person piece. But other programs I've done are coding classes or 3D printing classes, sewing classes. Or we did a breaker space a couple of years ago, which is I brought in a bunch of things that were already broken, and we could kind of unscrew them and open them up and look at the guts and see how things work, because that's a valuable part of making is unmaking and deconstructing to see how things fit together, and then you can rebuild and create something new. I also run a work circle, so other staff members are part of the collaboratory spaces, and I'm in charge of making sure that they have projects to work on, or we've got like a equipment management person and a donation person and program person, and so just managing the other people's work is part of what I do. I am also in charge of training, so training all of our staff on basic collaboratory usage so that they can help patrons who come in and want to use the space. And then I also train volunteers to come in and do a little more in-depth help with patrons. So you've never seen a 3D printer and you are really interested, a staff member can get you started with it, but a volunteer could like work with you to get a little further along if you've got like a complex question or problem that you need solved. I'm also on our social media team, so I post on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and I usually stick to the collaboratory posts, but every once in a while I jump in and help with something else. On the image you see, there's a Tilda Swinton as libraries meme, which was going around. So I found a picture of Tilda Swinton as a snow queen and then did a snowy version of our Shoot Park library. I was pretty proud of that one. I also, unlike other librarians, I actually am in charge of equipment repair. So I have taken apart sewing machines and 3D printers and a lot of troubleshooting. It's not something I was ever trained for, so I've had to learn how to use resources at my disposal, whether it's the manual that the machine came with, or I do a lot of YouTube searching to figure out how to take things apart and put them back together properly. A lot of, I would say troubleshooting is a big part of my life at the library, not just with machines, but with people too, figuring out what they need. And then I'm also responsible for communications about the collaboratory. So I work on the web page for the city. I work on newsletters, volunteer blogs, writing blurbs, and communicating with the outside public to let them know about the resources that we have, and then internal communication. So there's a lot of communicating that happens in the library, especially around the pandemic, because things have been closed and it's like, are we reopening and planning, and then we're not reopening, and then we are reopening, and there's a desire for people to know what's going on, and it's important that that I'm there to communicate, to the best of my knowledge, what's happening. Many librarians purchase books for the collection. That's how we have a collection of books, and not just books, but we have a library of things. And so purchasing digital cameras or instruments or board games, there's a librarian in charge of purchasing all the things that you can check out at the library, video games. I don't do any of that purchasing, but I do get to purchase tools and equipment for the collaboratories. And so that means I get to research new tools, new equipment, and take in patron consideration as well. So people are like, for a while, people were asking for a serger, and I was able to purchase one. Right now, we have a heat press, but only at one location. So that's another purchase I'm hoping to make. I'm looking at sublimation printers. It's just, there's just a lot of like fun stuff to investigate and see if it'll be a good fit for the space. So in terms of education for being a librarian, historically, you have to have a master's degree in library science or library and information science. And that's what I have. And that's, I think most of my colleagues here do have their masters. But as we consider social diversity and inclusion, we're realizing that there's institutional racism, which does not allow librarianship to be a very diverse field. And so many libraries are realizing how exclusionary the requirement of a master's degree is. And they're opening up librarian positions for people who have experience in libraries. And I think that's great. To be honest with you, I don't feel that my master's degree adequately prepared me for working in a library. I think I could have taken a couple of online classes in Boolean searches, which is the type of search that we do, and a couple of like research specific classes and maybe a cataloging class, all of which are available online through the American Library Association. So I feel like a librarian is a lot more than a researcher. It's somebody who can bridge a community member with resources in the community, and I think anybody can do that. So I'm excited about the future of the field, and I'm hopeful that we'll continue to involve librarians that do not have the master's degree, but have experience and a passion for community. If you'd like to be a librarian or work in a library, I would recommend volunteering first. I have worked in a few different libraries, and Hillsborough is really unique and progressive and non-traditional. And so it's a very different type of library than you would see even at Beaverton across the way. So it's there's not like a desk that you like walk up to and wait in line and get help from the person behind the desk. That's a very traditional model. In Hillsborough, it's you just walk in and there are people that work here that are sort of circulating around. We call it orbiting, and you can go up to anybody and anybody can help you. In a traditional library, you have youth services librarian, and if you're looking for something in the kids section, you go to the youth librarian. If you're looking for something in young adult, you go to the teen librarian, and if you're looking for something in the adult section, you go to the adult librarian. And they're very well versed in their roles. They know all the things there are to know about that particular subject matter, and they're experts. And here we all know a little bit about everything. So it's great because anybody really can help you. But if you need like in-depth things, there's only like a few of us that have like special expert skills and things. So it's a little different model. I recommend volunteering because you get a sense of the library that you think you might want to work in, and you can decide like, yes, this is for me, or like, no, I don't want to do this. Also, you should research. There's a lot of different types of librarianism. You can work in like archives and work with very old documents and wear white gloves and use parchment paper, and it's like a cold clean room and like very specialized type of librarian. If you're really interested in the law or in medicine, you can work in a law library or a medical library. If you love students, you can work in a school library. There's just lots of different types of librarianship out there. So I would recommend researching to see if you want to do that. Oh, and also within the library, there's a lot of different roles. So we have catalogers and purchasers and people who work within, like I was telling you, people who purchase the books, people who label the books, people who shelve the books. So in our library, we all kind of do all the things, but in a traditional library, you might just be a cataloger and you're in front of a computer all day just cataloging. And some people, that's just their jam. So it's awesome that they have that. I talked a little bit about pages. They are our materials managers. They, all the books that come in each day, they sort and put on carts, and all the hold requests that come in, they pull from the shelves and put on the hold shelves. And we have thousands of items that come in every day, books, CDs, DVDs, all the library of things items. And they rely on volunteers to actually put the items back on the shelves because there's just so much that comes through. So, so pages are one role in the library. Library assistants get to help with all sorts of projects. Many of the people that I work with in the Collaboratory are library assistants, and they can do story times, they can do programming, they can do book clubs. They're sort of like the support structure for librarians. So all of the things we need to make a program successful, the library assistants are there to do. They're also on the floor answering those research questions, the reference questions, like they're synonymous with librarians on the floor. There's not really a way to differentiate a library assistant from a librarian if you're a patron coming into the library. So, which I think is great. And there are some limitations to like what they can plan for or provide for that just a librarian can do, but most of our library has library assistants. I think there's only 10 librarians across both branches right now. And then volunteers. So I've talked about the shelving, but volunteers also run different story times. We have a Read to the Dogs story time at the libraries, and the volunteers run that. We've got like a Vietnamese story time and a sensory story time, and those are run by volunteers. And then of course the Collaboratory uses volunteers to help provide support to patrons needing it. Oh yeah, I wanted to share a scenario with you. Okay. So I'm gonna lay out the scenario. I'm gonna give you some options, and then I'll talk about the options. So here's the scenario. A patron comes into the library looking for a book they heard about on the radio, maybe on NPR, possibly last summer. They think it had to do with spies, and they think the cover of the book is red. So this happens all the time. This is a very common request. So the options are: option one, explain to the patron that there's no way to find this information without at least a title or author. Ask the patron to call or come back if, or call and come back in if they remember any other details. Option two is you can take the patron to the general fiction section and see if any books look familiar. They might not find the exact match, but something else might catch their eye. And then option three is to ask clarifying questions. Do you remember if the book was fictional or if it was a true story? Is it a graphic novel? Is it a book for teens or adults? Do you remember any details about the author? Are they well known? Tell me what you remember about the spies. Were they from another country? You can find similar books from the catalog that the patron might like and point them in that section of the library. Even if they don't get what they came in for, they don't leave empty-handed. So actually, all of these options are okay. Sometimes there's just not enough information to help find the item. The clarifying, option three is really having like an in-depth, this would be what I would refer to as like the reference interview. It's like really digging into the details of whatever they might remember. Figuring out if it's fiction or nonfiction is a game changer, because that's like a whole different section, right? This actually happened to me. This gentleman came in looking for something, and I just Googled NPR book reviews spy. Like, I think that's literally what I Googled, and something popped up from a few months ago, and he's like, yeah, I think that's it, but it wasn't exactly what he remembered, but it gave him something. So I don't know if that's what he wanted, but he was happy that there was something at least that came with it. So in our library, we say get to yes, and get to yes means having the patron leave feeling better than when they came in. And sometimes like we do not have the item they're looking for, but we can offer to place it on hold, or we can show them what library, if it's in another library, where it is. There's always like a way to try to solve the problem. And so that's the big role, I would say, is like in customer service. Like, how can I solve this for you? Even if I don't have exactly what you need in this moment. So I was going to talk about an interesting project that I worked on. When I first started, I started at the library as a practicum student, which is a requirement for your master's degree. And it just means you're an intern and you're working for free. So there's no, you don't get paid to work, but you do get school credit. And I was lucky enough to have an incredible project to work on as a student. They were wanting to redesign the children's area at Brookwood, and they wanted to integrate play into the space. So I was so excited to work on this. I did a lot of research on play and the importance of play on children's development, and found different ways to include play in the children's area at the library. Created different sections. So there was like active play and kind of like solo play. And then there was a sensory room for if things were kind of overstimulated. We called it the sensory forest. It was a little dimly lit and had sort of glowy magnetiles. Everything's in the past tense because it's been closed since the pandemic. So we'll reopen it, but it's just got furniture in there right now. Unfortunately, all of that work I did. But anyway, it was a really cool project to work on. I integrated universal design concepts, which consider people of all abilities. There was sort of a push to organize things by age, and I pushed pretty hard against that because I felt like that's deciding someone's ability based on their age. And so I really just wanted to make it more zoned with like active play, social play, solo play. And so the plan went through and we got some funding and they got to build out my vision, which felt pretty great as a student kind of coming into libraries for the first time. I ended up getting to write an article about it, and I have a little image here on the slideshow that was published in our Oregon Library Association journal. And then I was invited to present the redesign project at the OLA, the Oregon Library Association and Washington Library Association conference in Vancouver. So it really put me on the map as far as being a librarian before I even finished my degree. So it was a really cool project to get to work on. I got to learn a lot about the children's area and learn more about the importance of play in the process of learning, which is what I think is so cool about the library is that it's not just about the books, right? It's about the whole person and the community as a whole. So I just felt that was a really cool project. Okay, so I have a video tour I did of our library, and now I'm realizing I might not have shared sound this time around. So let me unshare. I'll stop sharing and then I'll reshare. It is. I did do it. Okay. Is that working?
This is the entrance to the Collaboratory. I'll take you inside. And you can see it's pretty big. There's a lot of space to create. Lots of different tools and equipment. And lots of materials for use. So this is our yarn area. There's some crochet hooks, some knitting hooks, some weaving pieces of equipment. There's a wool winder and a couple books if you're not sure how to get started. A little cozy area to do some of that. We have a heat press machine and some t-shirts. You can use vinyl cutouts to make iron-on designs. This is one of our practice ones for training. And I think there's a t-shirt that we've been practicing on too. Collab. We have a digital die cutter called the Silhouette.
Thank you for coming.
This is our digital die cutter, the Cameo. Lots of materials to make stickers. And we've got 3D printers. This is the Dremel. This is the Up Mini. And then this is the Dreamer. So anytime you come in, if one of these are available, you can just use it right away. We have some laptops. We call them Collab-tops because we like to be cute. And we even have a 3D scanner that is a little old and it's pretty time intensive, but it's pretty cool because it can scan something and turn it into a 3D model. And we have some basic supplies, a laminator, and then we have some really nice work tables. So you can bring things to work on. You can actually, if you're interested in sewing, we have these carts with sewing machines, and you can just wheel a cart over to a table. You can load it up with your choice of fabric. We have a lot of these fabrics, lots of different colors. We have a serger, which is different than a sewing machine, but in the same family. A lot of people are excited that we've got that. It's really cool to offer these tools for people that otherwise might not have access to a sewing machine and or a 3D printer, and learn some new skills or brush up on old skills. We have stuff for kiddos and, well, anybody who likes to build. We've got some Legos, some Kiva blocks, craft sticks, dowels, magnetiles, some felt, embroidery floss, lots of markers, crayons, coloring books, some perler beads, shapey scissors, and then lots of paper punches, envelopes, a little cinch binder. All these are stamps and ink pads, and a nice workstation here. These are old-fashioned die cutters, the analog die cuts, so they have different shapes with metal dies so that you can create letters or shapes, pictures for paper crafting. And then we have a little inspiration station, so you can grab a couple books, sit down, see if anything inspires you. Some origami, drawing, maker magazines, all sorts of cool things here. We have a button maker, and you can make some buttons, anything, different sizes. And in this cart, there are some books that we've weeded so that you can actually tear the pages out and make your own button on this little device, which is pretty cool. Instructions are there. And the last thing is this will be a coding cart. There's not a ton of coding things in here, but we do have some makey-makeys, some Arduino bits and bobs, some pieces, and then there's just there are some general tools in here. So that'll be a pretty exciting thing to come check out. Actually, this is really popular too. It's a typewriter. It's a working analog typewriter, and people really enjoy playing with it. So I'm really glad that we have that for people to access. But anyway, it's a pretty great space. This is the Brookwood Collaboratory. And it's actually going to be open on Friday, which means it's open now. If you're able to come and check it out, we'd love to see you.
So yeah, I filmed that right before we opened, but we are open. Both locations are open. So Shoot Park's a little bit smaller, but pretty much same equipment, minus only, well, there's just one 3D printer there. Shoot Park actually has a green screen wall so that you can create videos, and there's a video editing computer or supercomputer with video editing software. So both places are a great place to visit. Let me get to this next one. So I was asked to share what's in my toolbox, and I'm probably the only librarian who has a literal toolbox. I've got measuring tape, screwdrivers, wire cutters, pliers, tweezers, scissors, but other tools I use regularly are, I use the computer, we use some databases for our patron information. I use the Microsoft Office suite, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Publisher, and then I also use Adobe Creative Suite. I use InDesign a lot. I was a graphic designer before I was a librarian, so I make my own signage and my own, I'm on the social media team, so I like to make my own posts. So I rely on that software a lot. I also use Canva, which is a free image software online. I use USBs, I use digital cameras and video cameras, particularly since the beginning of the pandemic. We moved a lot of our content to YouTube. So we built, I already had a bunch of training videos on YouTube, but we started adding more content and creating some crafts that were video, accessible through videos. So I got really familiar with, our whole team got really familiar with producing videos, which wasn't something many of us had done before. I was asked to share a proud moment, and when I started this library, there was a different person in charge of the collaboratory, and the rules were really different. So the collaboratory was only open when a volunteer was scheduled to operate it. There just wasn't enough staff to run it all the time. And what I noticed as an observer was that people were really frustrated because there was this really cool space. It wasn't where it is now. It was in a smaller room. The lights were always off. There would be a sign on the door saying Wednesday 10 to 12, indicating that that's when it would be open. And a lot of the times it would be crossed out because the volunteer wouldn't show up. And so it was the space that was not used very much. And the other rule around it was that you had to be 14 to be in the space alone. If you were over 10, you could be in the space with a parent. And I was a parent, and I had a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old. And so library rules are the 9-year-old can't be unaccompanied by a parent in the whole library. You've got to be 10 to be unaccompanied. So my 9-year-old couldn't be in the library alone, but he wasn't allowed to step foot inside the collaboratory. But my 13-year-old couldn't be in the collaboratory without me in there. And I was like, this is a horrible rule. So this doesn't make sense at all. So I applied for the position when it came up, and I used some of those examples as why I felt like there were a lot of barriers to access. If I'm going through that, there's got to be a ton of other people going through that. I felt the collaboratory should be just like the rest of the library. It should be open for everyone. And there are tools that can be dangerous. There's, there are hot things, there are sharp things, but just like the rest of the library, if you're under 10, you can't be in there without an adult or a caregiver. So I felt like that was enough. Like I could place age guidelines on the equipment, but on the space itself, you can go in there, you can access magma tiles and Legos and coloring books. And so the library board agreed with me and allowed that policy change to reflect inside the collaboratory. And I also just wanted it open when the library was open. I was like, we've got all of this stuff in here and no way to access it. So I got that changed as well. And so that's been about 2.5, well, about 3 years now that we've been able to be open when the library is open. It's hard on staff, I will admit. Not all staff is as excited as I am about the collaboratory. People are a little nervous about equipment they're not that familiar with. So we have a system now where the work circle team is kind of popping in as available, and they're available on these relays that we can kind of like walkie-talkies. If someone's needing help, they can be relayed in and go and help. So we're figuring it out, and we're trying to manage patron expectations that this really is a DIY area. It's a do-it-yourself area, and we want to like help enable you to get the resources you need to figure it out yourself. We certainly don't want you to get hurt or for the equipment to be damaged, but we really don't have the staff capacity to just be in that space all the time, as much as I would love to just have my office in there. There are other priorities within the library. So that's another reason I do rely so heavily on those volunteers to be there. So what makes me fit well in this profession? I think that I really enjoy helping people, and I love problem solving. There's lots of different ways to help people in the library, and I like the variety of that too. I would not be a good cataloger that's like sitting at a computer just like typing in Dewey Decimal numbers. Like my brain would just kind of die, I think. I would fall asleep. I like to have these dynamic experiences, and I kind of like not knowing something. I'm pretty comfortable not knowing the answer and kind of hanging out with someone while we figure it out together. And so I love, I'm just like, bring it, like, hit me. What do you got? I want to see if I can like figure this out with you. So sometimes I'm helping people access their digital resources. Sometimes I'm helping people access their technology. Sometimes people are wanting to start a new business and they don't know how to get started. And so I'm helping them utilize the resources the library has. We have so many to try to jumpstart their search. I get to help people find places to live and find jobs. And there was a person that was coming in every day during our limited openings, just taking test after test after test, applying for jobs. And I would say she came in maybe every day for about 2 months, and she finally got a job. She was really nervous because she accepted it without knowing exactly the software they needed. And through one of our resources, I was able to find a tutorial for her about that software so she could learn a little bit about it before her first day. And that just, those moments feel so rewarding. Like this woman, I just saw her try so hard every day with our limited hours and limited access to the computers. And she was just like, she just did everything she could. And it was so cool to see her finally get that. Making those human connections is a big part of libraries, and I enjoy that part as well. It's also why I like the collaboratory, because you have makers of all types in there, and it's really cool when they start sort of cross-pollinating ideas. So I would say like problem solving and troubleshooting are my big skills, and those skills work whether I'm trying to make a 3D printer come back to life or I'm trying to help the patron gain access to materials. Some other skills that I've learned on the job are project management is big. So just managing the life of a project, and I usually have 20 or 30 projects going on at once, whether it's a program or a volunteer training schedule, or just communications. There's so much on my plate at any given time that I have to be able to manage those things effectively. I've developed leadership skills. I'm not a supervisor, but I am a leader of the work circle, and I lead about 13 library staff members, and I lead about 35 volunteers. So there's a lot of communication, a lot of questions that I get, and that's been something that I've learned how to do in the job. I've also got to do budgeting, which is not a strong skill set of mine, but I'm learning and I'm getting better at it. I have a lot of colleague support to help me, and just general advocacy for our patrons, for removing barriers. Like every time we see there's a barrier, or recognizing where white supremacy might have like created a weird barrier, finding ways to just dismantle it step by step by step. And our whole library is on a mission to remove all of those barriers. And then future for libraries. So my first library class that I took talked about the history of librarianship and how it's just an ever evolving profession. And I had never thought of it like that. But it's true. Like the library of today is so different from the library of 100 years ago, particularly the library I work in. You know, there's a lot of technology that we offer. There's something called the digital divide. So access to information is so important to like the foundation of our democracy. Like if you don't have access to information, you will not be well informed and be able to make decisions in your life. You won't be able to know who to vote for. You know, it's a cornerstone of our democracy, and having libraries provide that access is so important. Yet there are huge numbers of our populations that do not have access to technology. They don't have Wi-Fi, they don't have computers, and sometimes it's the only way to get information. Unfortunately, you know, it's cutting out a huge part of our population to not be able to access what's out there. So part of like the future of libraries is happening now. So we started checking out hotspots during the pandemic. We realized, you know, the building is closed for a period of time. That was, people still need to access, you know, everything's happening from home, right? Schools and work and all sorts of things are happening from home. People are needing access to Wi-Fi. We need to provide it. And so we got some funding, figured out how to check out Wi-Fi hotspots. And so now both libraries are have those in our collection. So you can check out a hotspot. We also got funding and have a plan to create laptops for checkout. So, so that's in the works. And then we also bought router extenders for both buildings. And so now, even if you're just in the parking lot near either library, you are able to access the Wi-Fi from the building. So, so those are just, it's part of librarianship, is like, what is the need in the community? And then how can we help fix that? And so that will just continue in the future of librarians. I would also say librarians of the future will need to be bilingual at least, and multilingual at best. You know, if you want to serve your entire population, you've got to be able to speak to them or understand them and communicate. So that's a big part of future librarians and current librarians. I also just notice a lot of the work we do are with populations that really need support. So some libraries hire social workers, counselors, support for people experiencing homelessness. So I think the librarian of the future will have some of those skills, or at least work with other people who have those skills. And then I was just going to talk about the library of things, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, but our library is one of the first to have a library of things available for checkout. That means you can check out an item that's a thing, like instruments are really big. If you're interested in playing the violin, but you don't want to purchase one and you're not sure if you're really into it, you can check it out at the library and test it out, see if it's your thing. You can check out digital cameras or webcams or scanners or VHS to DVD converters, which is an old school way of watching movies. You can even check out a DVD player, kitchen equipment. If you're curious about an Instant Pot, you can check one out. It's really, that I feel like is also in the future of libraries, having this community library of sharing. I know one of our librarians, his dream is to have a tool library, and those do exist in some parts of the country where you can check out like a shovel or a lawnmower or a drill. Actually, you can check out a drill now, but like maybe a power saw or something. These things that you maybe don't use all the time, but you need it for a particular project. So those types of resources and more, I think will continue to be necessary in the future. I will tell you that full-time librarian jobs are really competitive. I mentioned we only have 10 full-time we have 10 librarians. I think maybe 6 of us are full-time. It is a tough gig to find. I have a lot of colleagues who have moved across the country to find full-time librarian jobs. So that is something to consider if you're interested in being a librarian. That's another place where volunteering and maybe accepting library assistant jobs to get into a library might be a good way to go. It's great if you're interested in living anywhere. Just know that you might have to move to find that sweet full-time librarian job. And then the other thing I was going to mention about the future is, I sort of alluded to it earlier, is that, video production is not something I ever thought librarians would need to know how to do, yet all of our story times have moved to our YouTube page. And we've all had to learn how to do this, talk in a camera to lots of people. So I think it's just like anything else, like the industry will continue to evolve and the people working in it will continue to learn new skills. I think being a person who is flexible and resilient is really important in the library. It's not, I guess, stagnant, at least in my experience at this library. It's not a stagnant role at all. There's I'm doing things I never imagined a librarian would do, and I love it. It's pretty awesome. And then in terms of, I have a question, would I have done anything differently in high school? So I never thought about becoming a librarian until I was in my late 30s and I started volunteering at my son's elementary school library. I actually really enjoyed the shelving. It was very satisfying to have a full cart of books at the beginning of the day and then have it completely empty a few hours later. But I also got to help with the lesson plans. I got to substitute a few times, and I learned how to repair books, which was really cool. I decided to just try to see if I could get my master's, and then my first class, I just fell in love with libraries. I had no idea how community-centric they were. I still had sort of an old version of libraries in my mind. And I just didn't know. I didn't know it was anything more than books. And so I was really excited to be on that path. My career before libraries was graphic design, and that's also about solving problems. So I felt like that carried over nicely. And I think everything I've learned prior to becoming a librarian has helped me become a better librarian. I wish that while I was in college getting my bachelor's degree that I didn't have to know what I was going to do. I wish I would have taken the time to explore a little bit more in college. I was really focused on getting an English degree. I thought I was going to be a book editor. And so I didn't even take a lot of the fun English classes like literature or anything. It was all like grammar and rules. And it wasn't until I graduated that I realized that I was interested in graphic design. And then it wasn't until, like I said, later in life that I thought I'd be interested in libraries. I wish I would have allowed myself more time to explore. So that would be, I guess, my advice is if you're not sure, or even if you think you're sure, allow yourself a little bit of room to explore other possibilities, because you might be surprised on the path that takes you on. And then last but not least, of course, I have to give you some resources that I would recommend. So this screenshot is from our wccls.org website. Under the research tab, there's a resources by category, and there's jobs, careers, and education, which will give you quite a few links to access things like how to create a resume or how to build a cover letter. And you can even get live help with practicing how to interview. I also like to refer people to LinkedIn Learning. It used to be called lynda.com. And I don't know what the cost of it now, but with your library card, and I think Hillsborough School District and Beaverton School District for sure have a Washington County library card automatically. I believe with your library card, you can access the LinkedIn Learning, and there's tons of skills that you can learn there, like all the Microsoft Office things I talked about, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Publisher. You can also learn some of the Adobe Creative Suite software. You can also learn calligraphy or film editing. There's just so many resources available for free with your library card. And then if you're interested in pursuing a librarian degree, I would recommend making sure that your institution of choice is accredited by ALA. And ALA is the American Library Association. That's the overarching association for librarians. So it's a good, ala.org is a good place to visit if you're curious about what else you could do in libraries. And then most master's degree programs will say that they're ALA accredited, and if they don't, like on the front page, then they're probably not. And so that wraps up my presentation. I had no idea I really would talk for this long. I don't know if there's time for questions, but I hope that I was able to give you a small glimpse into what it means to be a librarian.
Yeah, students, if you guys want to put any questions in the chat or you want to unmute your mic, feel free to do so. There is a question. How old do you have to be to volunteer at the library?
Oh, that's a great question. We do have some teen volunteer opportunities. I believe you might have to be 14, but I'm not entirely sure. There is a volunteer information page on our City of Hillsborough library page. And I think if you just Google City of Hillsborough Library and then go to About Us, then there's information about volunteering.
Okay. And then there's a question about the oh my gosh, that
it's
word.
Okay. No, it's totally made up. It's a made up word. So it's
okay.
fine.
So I'm not, okay, that's great. Are the materials free to use, like the ones you guys had there?
Yes. Yes, everything in the library is free. So it's totally free to use. We've actually gone fine free. So if you're late turning in an item, you don't get charged for it. I think unless you don't turn it in after 30 days, then you get charged. But if you turn it back in, we remove the charge. So no, it's totally free. All of the materials are free to use. The fabric and the yarn, a lot of that has been donated. So we also accept donations, but yes, come in and use it. It's totally free.
Okay. And then there was a question, and I don't know if this got explained. So it's the collab, I'm just gonna say collab. Is that like a class kind of thing, or is it you just kind of show up?
It's if you just show up. We do historically we've offered classes, so we'll do that again at some point when we're doing in-person programming again. But no, you just go in and kind of tinker. You know, you sort of like figure out what's in there and what you want to work on. Like I said, there are some staff that can help a little bit, and we'll have volunteers that come pretty heavily on the weekends, so that's a good time to come in to explore. But right now there aren't any classes scheduled, but there will be some, but it'll still be the space will still be open just to kind of wander into, and there might be a class going on some of the tables, like a sewing class or a coding class, but that's a little bit different. Usually have to register for that ahead of time online.
Mhm. Okay. Well, doesn't look like there's any more questions. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.